So when are you looking to make the full-time switch from?
When?
Yeah.
As soon as possible. I just put in another release. It's already out.
What's your update?
So it's like a recycling reminder. In my opinion, the city was kind of falling short on having some type of global solution for that. So like, well, no, I mean, what's it called?
Very cool.
I think of this flyer. The only way I found out that they had like some type of service to help you out is by researching for the app that I was doing. So then I found out they actually had some type of reminder. But you have to go and find it first. And they actually sent out some flyers.
They do. They send out. I mean, I think I get a postcard twice a year. Like sometime around now,
Yeah.
at the beginning of the year, which is like
I
a
didn't.
calendar.
I never used it. It's like I just need something like that to look at.
Or just pop something that says recycle.
Basically, that's what I made.
Tuesday night it comes out and recycles.
Yeah, so that's what I made, and I just added push notifications, so you get a push notification the day before, or if you want to check it, just
Yeah,
exactly. So I'm from Orlando, and I emailed them because there's a feature in my app where you search your address to get
Where's the parse server?
which bounce off schedule you are and which day, it'll tell you which day. So the city can tell all this, putting up all this data, but the city of Orlando hadn't put up the data for the recycling schedule.
Is that the
So they have to put the data out there for me to use.
Right.
So I emailed them, I haven't heard back yet. I even emailed City of Boston. There's no really how anything like this. I'm making this. We're doing right now.
I'm not asking. I'm just asking you to give me the data, right?
Well, no, they had the data. I wanted them to like partner with Tim.
Oh, yeah.
They already had like a contract.
No, not the city of Boston. The city of East Boston.
And the guy who's in charge of the apartments. He doesn't understand the need of it. But yeah,
I mean, you think about how advanced you can make that app. Think about like the morning when you're like that. As it comes in, you can pull up the app, you can have a truck, you can go buy my house. I mean, that's.
They would need to have.
Yeah, right.
This is a problem.
Yeah, there's a lot of things like that.
I mean, they own every land post in there. It's not like, all right, you go.
There we go.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Really last minute.
Yeah.
To like 59 seconds.
About 4 times a year.
Yeah, there's a ton of stuff I can do.
Yeah, you're just you. It's a lot of fresh air. Yeah, I think this is display board. Okay. Oh, display board. Yeah. In this stage,
That should work. If you could partner with like, you could pull data from the USPS too. What's
going on, Jace?
Not much, are you?
It's got free parking, so I'm in a great mood.
So if you pull that data from the United States Postal Service, you could send them a offer or just like, hey, download this.
You're learning.
So like, you see the data, we're 150 people.
Yeah.
The United States Postal Service has a program called New Movers. It's everybody that moves in that area. And they refresh that data pipeline every monthly. So you could actually look at that data and figure out how to touch that data.
I'm making sure, because I just realized pretty major release, probably bigger than what way more features than I had in the first place. So I'm making sure that it's all good, because I've already had to like release a couple bug fixes. So once I'm good with that, I'm gonna put something next to it. Especially because I just got that flyer that said, hey, go on our website, do these 4 steps. I was like, no one's gonna do this. Do these, go on this website, fill this out, and like piggyback off that, like, yeah, everyone's seen this flyer, and like, by the way,
Yep.
download this instead of.
Well, they just released a new program too with, I don't know, the partnership, I can't remember the partner, that's how good the marketing was. Where you can do,
Welcome everyone. How's it going? Welcome to the January Austin iPhone Developer Meetup. My name is David. Today we've got Hunter giving a talk on some cool Swift language tricks. And after his talk, we'll have the remainder of the time to network and meet some other people interested in iOS development. Thanks.
All right, what's up, everyone? I'm glad to be here today. And basically, the goal is just to demonstrate unique features of Swift that can help you write neater code. Everything that I cover has already been covered in the Swift programming language book, but that's 500 pages and takes a lot of time to go through. So basically what I'm going to cover today is optionals, properties, closures, operations, and extensions. And I know it's kind of scattered, but I think the idea and the goal of today is just for you to take home something that you might not know about Swift already. So I'm going to do a high-level overview of all of those things, and then I'll just go straight into code, and we can just look through a small program that illustrates some of what I'm going to talk about right now. So just out of curiosity, how many of you use Swift as like your first programming language?
The first one we've learned, or our first choice with Xcode?
I guess like your primary language.
Yeah, primary language, yeah.
And then, are there a lot of people who are still using Objective-C right now? Is that the main one? Okay.
And willing to admit it?
Yeah. Okay, so optionals. If you're familiar with Swift, you already know about optionals. So I don't really have to go into too much about that. But basically, best practices with optionals is to never use the exclamation point. So if you're doing that, you probably shouldn't be doing it. And there are ways around it. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with if-let and if-var. And that's just if you need to like optionally bind your optional to a value so that you can use it and access that. There's also guard-let, and that just unwraps it on the lines below. And if it doesn't unwrap it, then you have a block to handle like an error case in which it didn't get unwrapped. And then there's also this nil coalescing operator. And if you have an optional, you can use the 2 question marks. Oh, just what happened. There's something I should press.
Try to unplug it and plug it back in.
That might work. Okay, and then this is the nil coalescing operator, and it just gives you a default value if your optional can't be unwrapped because there's no value there. Properties, there's basically 3 types of properties. There's stored properties, and those are just basic lets and vars. But one cool thing about vars is that you can have a didSet property, and whenever the value changes, you can percolate like a message to the rest of your code base. So sometimes it might be valuable to like post an NS notification and have like UI elements respond to changes in your model. There's also lazily stored properties, and those aren't computed until runtime. And you want to use those whenever something's computationally expensive and you might not need it in your program. And then there's also like complex initializations. And what I mean by that is basically like alert controllers. Basically, usually you'll have alerts that you have to initialize and then add those to an alert controller. So it might be valuable to just initialize your entire alert controller with those actions already embedded in it. And then there's also computed properties, and those aren't stored at all, but rather depend on surrounding properties. You can like combine those together and produce new values, or also modify external properties once you set this computed property.
Can you do stored and extension now? Stored properties and extension, or did they not get that in 3?
You know, I'm not sure. Yeah, I didn't do that for the code example that we'll go through.
Not yet.
I tried it.
You tried it? Yeah. And then closures are just blocks of code that get executed. And there's 3 types of them. I won't read the paragraph because it's just directly from the book, but there's global functions, that's what we're all familiar with, it's just func and then you have your function. But there's also nested functions that are functions within functions. I haven't used those really, and I can't really find a good case to use them. But if anybody has an example, we'll open up for Q&A, please let me know. And then there's closure expressions, which are just unnamed closures, and if you use lambdas in another programming language, it's basically that. They're useful for completion blocks. And then one thing I'll go into is how to avoid memory leaks. Swift uses automatic reference counting, and so you want to avoid having too strong references to certain properties. Basically, like if one property strongly refers to another, and another property strongly refers to that same property, then you have reference counts that can never drop to 0, so they'll never be deallocated. And it's a memory leak in the program, but Swift doesn't really warn you about that. So it's one thing to be cautious of whenever you're writing closure expressions. And then there's also extensions, which you just brought up, and that allows you to extend the functionality of like native classes and also your own custom classes. And operations, you can create custom operations to extend the language and its functionality. So those are the high level things, and it's just easier to show y'all in code how a lot of that looks. So I'll go in backwards order and start with operations. Here's an example of a custom operation.
Could you increase the font size?
Yeah. Let's see.
If you go to
Is there a quick way to, I usually do Command plus, but it's not.
If you go to the preferences, there's a presenter mode under fonts.
Okay. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So here's a custom operator. It's an infix, and it just means you have two things that surround it. You can also have postfix and prefix. I didn't go through those because this kind of covers what I intend to show. Basically, you can have like, this one takes two closures, and the first closure works on the background thread with like a global background priority queue, and it returns a result, and then the result is passed along to the next closure on the main thread. So an operation like this might be useful if you're downloading an image and you don't want to block the main thread. You can download it in the background and then pass it to the main queue. And that's what a definition would look like for that, and it's generic, so any type can be passed from the first closure to the next closure. I didn't talk about generics or give a high-level overview, but that's covered in the Swift book. And then I'll also give you an example later in the code.
What does that escaping do?
Escaping just means it refers to something outside of the closure block. Yeah, it'll automatically generate that for you if this closure is referring to something outside of it. I'm trying to see why it would be.
Escaping.
Yeah.
Isn't it because the main closure is something like being called from outside that method, and so the result is escaping that closure?
I think.
Whereas non-escaping would be like if you said let image equals, and then that was the actual image, and so it finished there inside the closure. That would be non-escaping, isn't that right?
Yeah, that covers it. Yeah.
Okay.
That's right.
So it's saying that I'm just gonna play back what I think I heard. I think you're
Yeah.
saying is that named argument to this function is gonna be executed outside the scope of this function?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And then I'll show you extensions. So this is how you can extend the functionality of the language. So these are two common strings, and I like to avoid having raw values in code. I don't know, just picky about that kind of thing. But an empty space is like used common in your programming language or in your application. So that seems like a valuable constant to declare. And you could just access it with dot, so like string dot empty, and then you can get that empty string. And space is another one. For int, instead of having like +1 similar to increment a value, you can just extend or add a function on the native value type of int and just call it int.incremented for any int that you have. And these things are just enums that I declared below. It's the same kind of concept. I just like to avoid having like a raw value there. So it avoids having like 1 in your program. It's more descriptive and it's tied to another value. So that's incremented and decremented. And mutating just means that you're changing the type, or you're changing a value type. So ints aren't supposed to be changed. Usually they're immutable. But since you're changing the value here by setting it to 1 plus itself, that's why this function has to have mutating in front of it. And then it's just returning itself as the changed value. Another extension that I like to use is a cancel extension on UI alert actions. That's pretty common, and it just avoids you having to type this line throughout your code for every alert controller that you have. And then this is just an enum. I assume you're familiar with that, but yeah. Okay, so I'll go ahead and show y'all computed properties, lazy properties, and all that. Here's a simple user class, and this is just a property that's not optional, so it remains constant throughout. It could have been a variable, but it doesn't change in this application. These are optional properties. I assume you're familiar with that. Here's a observed property. So you can add these little closure expressions right here, and did set will get thrown every time this value changes. So it might be useful to post a notification and have your application respond to it that way. So any other class could subscribe to this notification, and as soon as that value changes, it gets percolated through your program. And that's pretty nice. It like follows the reactive programming paradigm, which is a pretty cool thing to look into if you're not familiar with that. So here's a computed property, full name. It's just using the 2 first name, or the first name and last name properties to produce a new value. And this would be a way to force and wrap it, but you really want to avoid doing that, because if you declared it as an optional, odds are there's some case that you're not accounting for when you put an exclamation point right here. And that would throw a runtime crash and just lead to a less safe program. So instead, you could use the guard statements, and this one just unwraps the first name, and if it's not available, it returns the last name. And then this one unwraps the last name and returns the first name if that's not available. And then otherwise, you have both of those values, so you can just return the full name from that. Another way to do it would be with if-lets, but it's just kind of ugly to do it that way in this case. So here would be another example of how to do the same exact thing we just did there.
Go back up a little bit though.
Yeah.
Your first one is returning last name before you test it, right?
Oh yeah, but its full name is an optional value, so you don't really have to test it. Because it could be nil, or it could just be the last name itself.
Yeah, but you've got guard let last name equals self last name right below it, as if last name's optional. So-
It is optional.
Oh, I see, I get it.
But full name is also
even as
optional.
okay, got it.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah.
So it's just the full name. If you don't have the first name, the last name might be there, so you can return that. So that's just a nice way to combine property values into a completely new property on the fly. And so if your first name or last name changes, then this automatically changes because it's not stored anywhere. You also have a set. This one implies, if you just have a return value, it just implies that it's a get-only property. But you could also have a set here and change the value of other values depending on what this one is set to. Here is like a normal init function, but it also has a default parameter value. And so if you add in a default value here, it'll automatically generate multiple init functions, so that whenever you call it, in one case it'll just have all of these parameters that you can pass in, in the other case it'll have this one, and it does it automatically. So it's just a shortcut to defining multiple different init methods.
Defaults have to be on the end, is that right?
I think that's the convention. They might not have to be, but I think that's a convention to follow. So here is a function that has a completion handler, so it just loads. So here's the operator that I just showed y'all previously that works in the background thread to load something and then return it on the main thread. So here's the background block, and that's just, ordinarily you would like load that from an actual database and make a network call. Here I'm just returning some arbitrary user with all of those values And then from here, we get the user back in here and then can pass it to this completion handler right here. And that'll get executed on the main thread. You notice here the default parameter value is missing, and that's just because you get two different inits once you have a default value there. So here it shows up, but I didn't choose to use that init method. Are there any questions at this point? Because I'm just going to keep moving through code. If not, yeah.
I'm just wondering what would happen in an extension if you had like the same function defined twice?
I'm
Would it not
sure it'd
compile?
throw out a compile time error. Yeah.
Because
Yeah, it does.
Because in Objective-C, if you have multiple categories with like the same function, and
Mhm.
the categories are like extensions, and so on Objective-C, there's like a hierarchy of like when
Yeah.
they're imported and stuff, and I don't like that.
Okay. Yeah, I think Swift is pretty type safe, and it would. I'm sure it would throw an extension.
Yeah, it
error.
does. The method name plus the argument signature is the unique define. If you duplicate
Okay.
that, you're gonna get a compile error.
Yeah. So that's that, and then I'll show you how this is used in a view controller to demonstrate other things. These are just simple stored properties within a table view controller, and that's just taking the top friends' usernames and converting it to an array so that you can load it within a table view. Here's the nil coalescing operator I was talking about earlier, and it's just providing a default value for if this optional doesn't return anything. So if this is empty, this might be nil, so is empty might not return a value. So then they would just return true, so it's empty. And then in that case, you would just return 0 sections, otherwise you would return 1. And then down here, it's doing the same thing. Here is a guard statement to unwrap a table view cell that's dequeued from the table view and casted as a cell. And here's some cool syntactic sugar that you can take advantage of when using closures. So here's the most verbose way to do it. You have load, and then you type in completion, and then have your completion block here, and then run all of that stuff. However, you don't really need braces around the parameter values, so you can get rid of those. And then you also don't need braces around the closure itself. So these can go away as well, and you get something nice like this. And then you don't even need parameter names, because it can just infer it from the trailing closure. So you could have something like this in the end. And these are shorthand arguments that refer to the values themselves, so the user that's returned or the error. And if you type it in right here, it'll show you the two values. So that's like the shortest possible way you can do it. I'm kind of skeptical to use that because it's just not as explicit as it could be. And then also you can attach conditions to an optional binding, and this is just one. So if this alert controller is already being presented, this block won't get executed. And here's the lazy property that I was talking about earlier. So this just initializes an entire alert controller with all of the actions embedded already. So here's the action, and you have to use, I didn't use, that might be a memory leak right here, because I'm referring to self, and it's, oh no, I have unowned, okay. So this is the, what do you call that? Something list, I'm forgetting the name.
Capture list.
Capture list, yeah, that's it. This is a capture list to avoid pointing a strong reference from this closure block to this the self value, and that allows self to be deallocated.
Sometimes I see either,
Weak.
well, no, I see if let s equals self, and then the logic's in there, or I see self question mark in case it's dereferenced by the time this closure gets called. In case your observer is hanging around after the view controller is destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
So I've seen question mark or testing that self actually exists before the code tries to run.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if that's necessary or not, I've just seen it.
That might be useful. However, I think this closure block, since it's a lazy property, you would never access this.
Yeah, that's
if
not
the-
like an observer. That's
Yeah.
more where I've seen it, yep.
Okay, so in this case, you would never have this block run where the original class was deallocated.
Yep, that makes total sense.
And then one other thing that's useful to use if you're not using it already is parameter labels, and that allows your functions to be read like sentences. And I think that's what the latest Swift 3 version has really pressed strongly. So instead of saying like update user and then having user again right here, you don't want to be redundant in your wording of a function. So it's best to just do like update with, and then the typing is so strong you don't really need to worry about that. Just use like a descriptive name for your variable or constant and pass it in, and then it reads much better. For example, if I took away this and then said like self update user, and then it just looks shitty, I guess. So there's that, this, and what else? I think that mostly covers some of the cool things that I was reading while going through the Swift programming language book. So I'd recommend, if you haven't read it already, just make the time to go through the Swift programming language thing. It's free on iBooks, and it's really useful, and you really get to understand the language as you're going through it. So I think that's all I have. I know that was pretty like ad hoc in my stuff, but these are just interesting things that I found. And if you're not using some of these practices, it might be useful to incorporate them in your coding. So if you have like questions on anything at this point, I can take those. If there's tips that I missed, that would be helpful to know as well. If there's certain things that you use while coding.
I just learned one today. I haven't used it yet, but on break and continue, you can use a label and refer to which block if you've got a couple nested blocks.
Mm-hmm.
I just saw that. I hadn't seen it before.
Oh, okay.
So if you put a for loop inside of a for loop, you can put outer colon top for loop, and then inner colon inner for loop, and then you can say break outer break inner down inside there.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
tell the compiler which loop to break out of.
Yeah. Are there other ones that y'all use that I missed that might make your code look cleaner?
I think generics, right?
Yeah. So this little thing that I was talking about right here. What does that look like in Objective-C? I might have to like look at an actual piece of code, but
They like added it to Objective-C after they did it in Swift.
Mhm.
So I hadn't really used it.
yeah. But they're pretty powerful because you can make a function respond to any value that you pass in.
Yeah. I mean, Objective-C mostly you just have it just be some superclass that all the types would, or it's classes.
Mhm.
So you would just have like some higher level class that you would just say it's one of those, and then maybe even NS object, and then inside you would kind of just because with Objective-C you can send messages to any type of object, and there's no checking. So
Yeah.
if you know that it's safe, then you can call it. But if not, then it'll just break it build time.
Okay. Well, that's good. Yeah. Not at
So
runtime.
this is a lot better.
Mm-hmm.
But the part that I didn't really understand is like what the T means. And
Yeah, it's just, I think that can actually be any value, so if I change it to R,
yeah.
it's just a placeholder value, and that'll work as well.
Oh, does the new Xcode have refactor? Did it just fix them everywhere? Or did you?
Well, no, so this is generic, so there's no need for it to change anywhere else in the code.
No, it is. On the return of your function, you change the T to an R
Yeah.
in one place, and over in the return, other places it's updated.
Oh, and I clicked on it.
Oh, you
Yeah.
did do that. Okay, I missed it.
Yeah, it's not that advanced.
Well, actually, I'll teach you my favorite trick.
What's that?
Is it
Command
Command Option
replace?
E or Command Control E?
Command Control E.
Highlight.
Oh, that's sick, yeah.
Did it do it? Yeah,
Oh.
edit all at once. You see that?
Oh, okay, so it just finds it everywhere in the code and then,
Everywhere in the scope, actually.
okay. That's useful.
Was it Control or Command? What'd you?
Command Option T?
Command
you said?
Option E.
Oh, Command Option
You,
E.
you highlight something and then it'll select all of them. You can edit it all at once. It's my new favorite trick.
Yeah, that's,
Was it-
Command,
Wait, you have to highlight it first.
Alt.
Put the T back.
oh, shit. Alright, highlighted command option T.
Maybe it's Command Control T. What did you,
I got it highlighted.
I'll have to look it up.
Command Control T. Oh, I just had it working.
Yeah, you just did it. I don't remember.
Shift. Boom.
There you got it.
Okay. Yeah, it's
What was it?
Command Control E.
Yeah.
Command Control E.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Alright, yeah, that's nice to know.
They grabbed that from TextMate.
Whoa.
It's my favorite feature.
That's really cool. Yeah, I like that. Alright, if there's no more questions, yeah,
Dude,
what's up?
every day
I'm gonna-
you just got a lot better.
I know there are no stupid questions, but this is a really stupid question. I have been out of the loop since October because my sister has been really seriously ill and I've been in Chattanooga taking care of her. This is, I mean, I'm seeing stuff that I don't remember seeing before. Closure is new to me.
Mhm.
The guard let, I mean, is this all stuff that's part of Swift 3? Or have I been, most of these meetings that I've come to have been more low level. You're really hitting some serious stuff here.
Yeah, I don't think they're part of Swift 3. I think Swift 3 was like mostly refinement of the language and making everything really consistent across like different accessing patterns. I use the closures in Swift 2, and I think they're in Swift 1.
Okay.
But I
All right,
think
well,
the syntax might have improved on them.
I haven't been doing any real Swift coding,
Mhm.
so I need to read the book.
Yeah. What's your main programming language?
I do a lot of my programming in assembly language. I write
Okay.
device drivers and things like that.
Yeah, that's
So,
pretty,
I've done C
pretty low level.
and, C++ and
Mhm.
some of that, but.
Yeah. Those definitely have their use cases. One thing that's really nice about Swift is it's super high level, and you can abstract so much of the concrete details away and make code like this that would take, I don't know how many lines in another language, really compact and really nicely, easily to read. So, yeah, hopefully this session was helpful for everyone. I think that covers it if there's no more questions.
Actually,
What's up?
so I've been trying to practice multi-threading, and I see that's
Yeah.
what you kind of have there, but what does that first line mean, and what does that second line mean?
This one?
So, yeah, so dispatch queue, yeah, what does that mean?
It's just getting one of the queues that's available. So here, that's the main queue. That's just the main thread.
Uh-huh.
So this will run and allow you to like modify UI elements. Whereas this one is useful for background like processes.
So that goes to the background, so then what does it mean by let result equals background closure? Like, what does that do?
So this background closure is returning a generic type. So let's say your background closure was fetching an image from the internet. That would be the type. And so the result would be a UI image. If you remember in this case, I think I fetched a friend from the database right here. So right here in this case, it would return a user from the background thread, and then it's passing that user to the next main thread. So it carries over into this application, and now you can like modify a profile view with the user data right here.
And what if there's nothing there, what would happen?
I think the type is generic, so it should be, I might have been able to declare it an optional. See.
What do you mean when there's nothing there? You mean there's no return from the first function?
Like if it's
you
optional and there's
yeah,
no
return
value?
nothing.
Let's see. I think T might cover an optional value.
Okay.
So if I returned, what would be user optional? I think if I returned a user optional, it would carry over into this,
Okay.
because that's a generic type.
But then the second closure would have to accept the optional, right?
Yeah, so then this user would automatically be an optional value. So I think if I do let user equals user, or I can use colon, and then I return this optional, this one should be an optional. Maybe not. I gotta look into that one. Oh, because it has to be a var. I'll have to look more into that. I thought this would automatically be optional. Maybe not.
If that sounds cool to you, that functionality, y'all may wanna check out Promise Kit.
Yeah, I saw
it was-
that too.
Yeah, from the guy who did Homebrew.
You say Promise Kit or
Promise Kit?
Promise Kit?
And that's exactly what it does, is what he's talking about. And it makes it really clean where, you know, your asynchronous returns, you get it back and it's a promise that it has it, or, you know, it does this, if it doesn't have it, then it does this, and it makes it really clean, it's really well documented, it has a ton of stars on GitHub.
Yeah, it's funny. I actually just read that
Just check
article
that
today.
out.
Yeah, I just saw the article today. I
Yeah.
promised it.
The nice thing is you can have like 3 promises and it won't go to the next thing until the 3 are all done.
Yeah,
So you can have like 3 URLs that you need, get them all 3 back, and then it goes to the next thing.
Okay,
I do have a
Question?
question. Why did you choose to use a static function on 118 versus a regular function?
oh, static function? So that allows you to refer to this method without an instance of a user. So if you just wanna load any user from the background who's not already present in your application, you can refer to it that way. So if I went in here and just, you wanna do it here, but this will demonstrate it. So now you can do either a knit, and like a knit a user with a username, and that'll allow you to reference someone in the database, or you can actually load someone from the database itself. And this loads attached to the user, so you know you're loading the user already. Yeah. I think that's it. Alright,
Awesome.
thanks guys, appreciate it.
Thank you, Hunter.
Thank you.
Cool, so we have the rest of the time to just hang out and talk about stuff. And if anyone has any other talks you want to give in upcoming meetups, just let me know. You can reply back to the meetup emails, and I'm always happy to schedule people to give talks. So.
I've got a request, I've got a bug that's killing me with, I just set up my first parse server, so I probably did something wrong. And I'm getting, using the Facebook login, you know, the parse Facebook utils, that sort of deal. It's returning nil and nil for the user and the error. And I'm using the same code that I've used in other apps. It's worked before, so I'm assuming it's in other apps that were on parse server, so I'm assuming it's something I did when setting up the parse server. But if that sounds like something you might be able to help with, I will happily buy you a beer. If you can help me.
Help first, then the beer.
Yeah.
So it's the Facebook SDK that's returning nil-nil?
Yeah, the PF Facebook utils log in and background with permissions.
Yeah, and you've checked all your settings on the Facebook side?
I have. I mean, I could be just missing something, or just not seeing it. So a fresh set of eyes is always welcome. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if something about our server set up. Or, I mean, heck, it could be just a setting on the Facebook side of things, but a quadruple check, that's for sure.
It's actually bringing up the Facebook UI, their dialogue.
It does, so it goes all the way through.